Hello, I'm Alex McLaren. I'm an actor and I've worked as a communications coach since 2002. Now so much business is being conducted remotely, the ways in which we talk, present, build relationships and connect is changing. In this podcast, I want to explore all those issues and prove to you that no matter who you are, you can talk to anyone. Hello, everybody, and welcome to You Can Talk to Anyone, the podcast in which we open the bonnet on our communications engine. I'm Alex McLaren. I'm one of the directors here at the Spontaneity Shop. And this week we are talking about all shapes and sizes, the bodies that we bring to our conversations with people. This week, I'm so lucky. I've invited two guests, and they are Sue Harrison and Lucy Trodd. And the reason I asked them is that I really enjoyed the comedy drama videos they made called One Size Fits All. So hello, Sue, and hello, Lucy.
Hi, very nice to be here.
Hello there.
Sue, you're the person I know least well of the two of you. So tell me a little about the films that you made with Lucy, how you came to make them and what they're about.
Yeah, well, Lucy and I have known each other for a really long time through Showstoppers, the improvised musical. And one day we were on tour just having a nice cup of tea in a cafe, and we started talking about our different heights. So I'm really small and Lucy's really tall. And we kind of hit upon the fact that even though we were opposite ends of the height spectrum, we encountered the same kind of funny reactions from people or different reactions, but coming from a similar place. And from that moment, I think that sparked the beginning of our kind of writing journey in a way. And from that moment on, we started writing together.
That's brilliant. And you shot those films, I think, here in Folkestone, where I live, and Lucy lives, is it 18 months ago or 12 months ago? We
shot them in, I think it was August 2020. It was in one of the bits where things were sort of opening up, but also still really difficult in one of those bits of time.
Yeah, it was the first time wearing masks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, we'll definitely make sure we include some. Is it okay if we include links to the film in the show notes for this podcast? That's brilliant.
Yeah, great.
And Lucy, what was your experience kind of when you were thinking about wanting to make comedy about this?
Yeah, I remember specifically being in a high street shop. We had to buy socks because we were on tour and we were looking at the ladies' socks. And we were just looking at the ladies' socks. They're size 4 to 8. You know, I'm a size 9, and I think Sue's a 2.
2.5, yeah.
2.5. And we're just looking at the ladies' socks for a really long time. And then I can't remember if it was me or Sue when I'm going to the men's department and I'm going to the kids' department. And we realised, you know, that was probably one of the first scenes we wrote, which didn't actually make it into the show, but it made it into the longer version of the show because these are just tasters of a larger thing that we're writing.
That's great. So you're working on a kind of a longer drama about it all, or a sort of a series?
Yeah. Well, we're calling it, a dramedy, and there's been much debate about what that actually is. But I guess our sort of tone and what we like in comedy generally is quite gentle, and that's quite fun to explore because sometimes people don't know how to accept that because they're used to more, quote marks, shouty comedy. So we're just trying to create something a bit gentle and, warm and full of visual gags as well, because we're both, big into the physical comedy as well.
Even as you're talking, I'm just thinking of millions of things I wanted to ask you. And one of them is actually about that thing about the socks. I didn't know about the sketch. That's great. But this thing about going back to the children's department, Sue, because I was thinking about the sort of the bodies that we bring to interactions. And of course, our bodies change. And will continue to change. And we've all been the littlest once because we were all when you were a tiny kid, though, Lucy, there will have been bigger kids than you.
I don't remember.
Do you not even remember?
I don't remember a time when I was smaller than anyone. Maybe there was a time, because of like hand-me-down. I got an older sister who's shorter than me, and I do remember a time when I couldn't get hand-me-down. So yes, I'm sort of fantasized. I've what's the word? I've dramatized that a bit in my mind.
Well, no, but that's interesting. It may be literally that it's just so long ago that almost like, no, it doesn't really feature as part of my functioning experience as a human.
I do remember a very, in primary school being told, don't worry, Lucy, you'll stop growing soon and everyone will catch up with you. Like it was a bad thing to be tall. Like you don't want to be a tall woman.
Yeah, and I obviously had the reverse, which was, don't worry.
Eventually.
Not from my family or friends, but from, random people.
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like you don't realise it yourself, but other people tell you you're different.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I'm sure I was fine with who I was.
Yeah, that's so true. Because I did feel fine with who I was because my... I was very lucky to have a really brilliant parents and lovely family and stuff. So I didn't feel, crushing self-doubt or anything. But then it would be a stranger or a like tenuously connected person that would make you feel aware of your differences. Yeah, I remember one day this girl who her mum was like, "Oh, we just need to put you in a tub of compost." And then you'll grow. And I was like, oh my God.
I've literally had tourists stop me in the street and just say, so long, and take a photo of me like I was some sort of tourist attraction. Yeah.
God. That's extreme. That's extreme. I suppose another reason why I'm thinking back as well to our childhoods is that often because most of us, I say that, my world is full of adoptees actually, but we're genetically related to our families. And so we share physical characteristics with them. And so I know I've met your parents, Lucy. Paul's quite big, your dad, isn't he? But he's not super tall, I would say.
Yeah, I think he's 6'2". So that's
okay. So maybe it's just in context with your biggish family.
Yeah.
But Sue, are your family small like you?
Yeah, they are actually.
Okay. I'm thinking about one of the scenes was about sort of the thing about normal. You only become aware of, like, normal is your world, basically. And so when you're a tiny kid in the family you're in, that's just normality. It's when you're kind of then beginning to engage with sort of everybody else that you start becoming, okay, hang on. In what ways am I typical or just like everybody else? And in what ways do I feel very different? And then in what ways am I treated as different as well? That those things begin to, I think, affect the way we socially engage with other people. So that thing about our sort of our family backgrounds and our childhood, I think, is a real issue. So, for example, I was a really late developer as a teenager. Okay. So I've got 3 brothers and we all hit it roughly in sequence after one another. But it meant that I was the littlest in my class when I was a teenager for a while. And now I'm 5'10". I'm a grown, I'm sort of, but the legacy of that memory as a kid, I think, stays with me. Because there's a very formative time. And so even though it's a long, long ago, I'm still it's part of how I think about these issues when engaging with people. And also I think about it as an actor. I mean, you two, I was just sort of reviewing your career, Sue, as well, is that a lot of the way actors think about the world is in the story potential of it all. Okay. We're even exploiting our own bodies in that way. But that isn't necessarily the way everybody thinks about it. So you guys have a very kind of just delightfully, like, you're looking for the fun in the quirks of your experience rather than sort of saying this is traumatic.
I don't know how much you get a choice in that, because when you're being, in my case, mistaken for a man, it's like, how is that not funny? Like I can't cry, although at times I've been like, seriously, like I'm wearing, not that anyone can wear a dress, but I was wearing a dress and a pink hat and like ladies' boots for once. Like I'd actually made an effort, and I still got stopped for a questionnaire at the weekend, and it was like, "Excuse me, sir." I was like, "Really? Still happening, Sue?"
Oh my God! Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
Yeah. I think sometimes people, in their defense, I think sometimes people just see a shape and they just think man shape, and then when they look, they're like horrified.
I was once, I'm thinking about misgendering. I think once as a young teen, this is again partly related to being sort of feeling like a sort of a child among grown-ups. Somebody once said, is it a boy or a girl? I think I had slightly longer hair at the time. And I don't remember it as funny. Maybe that's a bloke thing. I don't know.
Or an age thing. I don't know.
But again, it made me not, I was thinking, I maybe I would think, gosh, how do you ride that out with such style? But you do. Maybe it's because you're thinking, this is ridiculous rather than.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think I'm very aware of like my sort of privilege in the world, if you know what I mean, and like largely how lucky I am in many ways. Yeah, so I wouldn't gravitate towards feeling sorry for myself about it, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
It's just like a sort of a kind of comedy filter you have on life.
Yeah, and it's like a comedy filter and also an observation filter, which is sort of almost the same thing, isn't it? But like which I think is really useful, and I'm kind of feel lucky to have that filter of like knowing what it's like to stand slightly outside of something, not in a big traumatic way necessarily, but just to be, like you said, like the quirks of being a little bit different.
Yeah.
Just sort of, and it enables you to have potentially a bit of empathy for other people who might feel that way in similar or different situations. All of which is really useful for writing characters and,
yes,
and being aware of your own ridiculousness.
Yeah. I think it also gives you sort of ingrained habits. So we talked about school photos, and I was always back row middle with the boys, and Sue was always front row, the crossed leg gang. And just thinking how that translates to being on stage is I will generally just sort of gravitate to the back just so that people can see other people. But actually, that's one of the great things about the show we do, Showstopper, is that we don't always have to play to type, and it's very liberating in that way. I can be downstage middle.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a little bit about this question about type? Because one thing which all actors have to deal with is the assumptions that people make. This is what you look like, sound like, this is what you're bringing as a human body. And then there's also these narrative cliches that people then will put on you as typecasting. So, Sue, if you had to say, oh, this is sort of the typecasting cliches about somebody with my body, what would you say they were?
Well, it's a really interesting one now because I'm older, but when I was in my 20s, it would just be kids.
Yes.
It would literally just be playing kids. And that brought like a lot of pleasure, but also a lot of frustration.
Yeah.
Because, in many ways it was brilliant because it enabled me to have a specific type, which can help you to get work, can do. It also means you're not suited for lots of other roles. And it's great fun playing kids because I am playful and I do everything I do is sort of, I gravitate towards playfulness. So it made sense that I would be quite good at that. But also then it's frustrating because a lot of the time you're playing a child protagonist, which is often written in a really boring way. And often they just come in like, if it's not that I ever played Alice in Alice in Wonderland, but for example, basically her role is just to be like, where am I? Who are you? And then everyone else does funny stuff around her. And meanwhile, I'm in those kind of roles. In my 20s, I'd be like, but I like being funny.
Yeah,
and I can't
and you're
be.
really good at those parts.
Oh, thanks, mate. So So that was the general typecasting, was just that. But now I think, now it's kind of interesting because it's like it's all up for grabs.
You've seen it changing. Do you think is that to do with you growing out of? I know we've got younger actors to play those children, or is it to do with the world changing?
That's a good question. I think it's a bit of. There was a certain point when I decided not to take those roles anymore, not to go up for them, and also obviously now I it should be people in their 20s playing those roles now anyway, so it wouldn't be appropriate. But I think also it's an interesting point about whether the world's changing, because I think it might be. Not that we're seeing any results straight away, but I think maybe with younger people, there is a bit more acceptance and awareness and lack of judgment about all kinds of different looks and different ways that people identify and different ways that people present themselves. So I feel like potentially it's quite hopeful.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it strikes me as well that having been asked to play those particular roles, you've done a lot of improvising and writing, because you don't just want to tell that sort of story which starts to be in your own history rather than in your present, and you want to go and create your own thing. That's interesting. How about you, Lucy? As I say, we put cliches and assumptions on particular sort of, I don't know, this is what this kind of person looks like within stories. That's been the legacy. What's it been for you in terms of typecasting?
I think I was told from a young age, from when I graduated from university, that TV, I wouldn't be able to do TV because I wouldn't fit in the frame with other people, stuff like this, right? So I used to, like, if you look at my history of my CVs on Spotlight, I went from being 5'11". I haven't changed height since I was 13. I went from being 5'11", and now I'm 6'2" on my CV.
So you've been inching towards disclosure about reality.
Inching towards acceptance, I think. Just
That's
like
interesting.
kind of, I used to hide it. I hid, other things in my life, like being a mother, just so you get work.
That's part of this. Yeah,
but then why do you want to hide it when that's this is what we found together? It's our superpower. It's our selling point if you want to be more marketing orientated. But one thing I would love to see, and I have not yet seen, is a love story with a larger woman. Whether that's width or height or whatever. Whenever I see a sort of particularly a musical and there's the moment when they fall in love and they lift her up, I'm like, nah, never going to happen with me. Not that I like being lifted anyway, which might also be a thing we have in common, Sue, I think, about being lifted in shows.
Yeah. I don't like being lifted if there's no agreement. If they're like, as in with your eyes. I'm talking about improvised shows, obviously.
Sure.
But I think maybe that might be common for lots of women, because it's like that feeling of just being treated a bit like a chair for a moment.
Yeah, you'd be the best, best friend, sort of encouraging the beautiful one to carry on. That's the parts that are available to me, which are really fun to play, to be honest. But I don't think I necessarily want to play that part, but I'd like to see it.
I don't see often couples, like we're talking about straight couples, men and women, in movies in which the woman is taller than the man. But I see that lots in my life. Yeah, and it's one of the things which is frustrating. You kind of go, can't you see this? One I can think of is I saw a film called Greenberg, which is Ben Stiller, and Greta Gerwig, who is the female protagonist, is taller than Stiller by about 4 inches. So that might cheer you up.
Yeah,
it's not the happiest of relationships, but it's a very true depiction of a romance, so it's worth watching, I'd say, for that reason.
When I was younger, I do remember having sort of Gina Davis, Julia Roberts, what's her name, married to Tom Cruise at the time, Nicole Kidman. Those were my kind of like, tall women can, but then you look at their stats and they're maybe like 5'11", And then so there's like Gwendolyn Christie now, but then there comes a point when they sort of, you go up for parts and then they get it. Like I went up for a part in Star Wars and then Gwendolyn Christie got it. Of course, she's famous. I'm not. But
there's only room in the world for one
tall
actor as tall as you.
Do you have sort of small role models, Sue?
Yeah. When I was growing up, it was classic Kylie Minogue. But even she wasn't quite small enough. I think she's like 5'1", but then sometimes her height would change in terms of the reporting of her height. But anyway, but yeah, I definitely do. And nowadays as well, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but I am sort of very aware of, if I see a famous person, I'm like, oh, brilliant, that's useful.
Yeah.
Yes, no, it is helpful. And it's a funny thing that people were telling you, Lucy, that you couldn't be on camera, because camera is one of the things which can hugely cheat all of those things. I mean, notoriously, the experience of meeting movie stars, you kind of go, oh, not as big as I thought they'd be, because we're used to seeing them exploded onto massive movie screens and shot from very specific angles. The camera puts your perspective at a particular place, and that can affect how you engage with people. And we're just wondering as well, we're doing this on a remote it is all about our bodies, but of course we're having a disembodied conversation. So when you're, I suppose I'm interested in when you are encountering people for the first time, so away from your world as performers, do you think there are experiences that you have because of the size you are that are particular? So what do you think, Sue? Do you think there are assumptions you have to engage with, or have to counter, or come up with strategies to make sure people don't put you in cliched boxes?
I mean, I feel it less now that I look a bit older as well. But when I was younger, I guess I was very aware that I looked incredibly young. Like when I was in my 20s, I looked like I was 15, or even younger at times. So I suppose that was the main thing I was having to encounter in terms of someone's perception, was like, perhaps it was, I'm mature enough to handle whatever the situation I was engaging with was, for example, or I don't know. Nowadays, I suppose I don't really encounter it as much, but perhaps it would be in a situation where, for example, if I was doing like a corporate workshop with a load of alpha male businessmen. I mean, that's very specific. And normally nothing would be as sort of binary as that. But perhaps I would have a slight awareness of like, I just want to quickly make sure that they take me seriously. And for them not to think that I'm, not to underestimate me. I think that's the thing, is that if you are very, very small and you used to look young, then perhaps there's a feeling of like not wanting to be underestimated, because actually you're like, do you know what? I can handle anything you throw at me.
So maybe it's funny trying to think back to those, but what do you do? What's your strategy? How do you do that? How do you make it clear they shouldn't underestimate you?
I think I'm conscious of having confident, open body language, if I was going to really analyse it and break it down. I mean, I would hope to do that anyway, and I think I would probably do that regardless of my size if I was leading a workshop or leading something. But perhaps it's just an extra motivating factor to make sure that I do come across as calm and confident.
Yes.
And to reflect that in my body language. I think that would be something that I would, employ consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah, I mean, so physically stiller and slightly more kind of front foot and towards them.
Yeah, I think so. And I suppose if it was a class, like if it was a class of sort of unruly students or something, I guess there's sort of similar overlap with that. And I'd employ a similar thing, but maybe, I don't know, I feel like also it's just about proving yourself very quickly. Proving your knowledge and proving your skill, maybe by what you say, or maybe by, in the context of a comedy workshop, making people laugh. It's a kind of professional context. You want to kind of preempt, like kind of sort of dominate the territory quickly. Okay, set your terms rather than allow myths to grow up that are irrelevant. Maybe. Yeah, although I don't really think of it as like dominating, because my style is quite, as a teacher and stuff, is quite gentle. And also I've never wanted to be someone that overcompensated and was like, sort of like shouty and elbowy. That's not my personality anyway, but I never wanted the way I looked to force me to have to do that, so I haven't. But maybe it's just about keeping my cool. I don't know.
That's interesting. Thanks for picking me up. When I'm talking about dominating, I suppose I'm not talking about you doing something, as you say, overcompensate, but the fact that you're going first, going quick, like do this early, strikes me as very active rather than wait and see and let it happen. It's like learn from the last time, I suppose. That's what
whereas I kind of have the opposite.
Lucy.
I was head girl at school, and I've spent a lot of time trying to blend, and even when I try and hide, it's like, you must be the person in charge. Especially now I've got grey hair, even more so. They're like, must be her. She looks like she knows what she's doing. And often as a result, I think I find myself volunteering for things. Like in the pandemic, I was helping at the vaccine centre, and I was really great at directing traffic. It was like a dream job for me. Found my calling. But I think people can see me, and I'm direct, and But I think I definitely try and blend, which is quite hard when you're 6'2" and a size 18.
But okay, so what do you do? Do you know what you do in those circumstances? Do you literally retreat, physically go to
physically?
The back? Okay.
Yeah, well, often in sort of corporate environments, they sometimes are male dominated, so people tend to be taller anyway,
Yeah.
so that doesn't happen uh, probably. But yeah, if I wasn't in charge of that session, I would just physically kind of not stoop a bit and stand at the
Yeah.
back and try and be quiet, which I find very hard.
Fascinating. It's interesting. I mean, I was thinking about what assumptions people make about me, and I think I'm always happy to run conversations. And so if I want to not do that, I have to work really hard at kind of pushing people's eye contact around to everybody else in order to kind of to almost, as you say, directing traffic's a good way of talking about it.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic in a group, isn't it? Who do people, with their eyes report back to? And if you're always that person, you're like, I'm not even listening. Like, look at someone else.
Yeah, physically look at the table until they talk to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, fascinating. Is there anything that you'd like to be different about talking to people about this question? Anything, if you could change it, what would it be?
I'd say, when you're meeting someone who you might deem to be different or notice something different about them, whether, I can't speak for all types of outside of the norm, but I guess like it would be great if it wasn't the first thing you said. Like if you can find an in and you genuinely would like to relate and learn,
Yeah.
maybe that's for conversation number 3 or 4, but not like the minute you see someone, aren't you tall? Where do you buy your clothes? Did you know they used to give giants extra money for trouser length in the old days? Stuff like this. You're like, yeah, I did, because literally everyone told me that,
Everyone's told me.
and it is a cliche. But I think I'm much more comfortable with my size now. Now I've sort of passed the 40 mark, and now I've let the grey hair go. I think you just can't rise to it anymore. I wouldn't change myself. Although
No.
there were times when I was growing up, I wished I was normal. I wished I could, be a ballet dancer and be lifted and stuff, but it's just not to be. And as a result, it's made me who I am, and I'm happy with that.
No, that's fascinating. There was a time when this person wanted to change things that now it wouldn't, and it's the same person, but
Yeah.
it's but different feelings about itself. How about you, Sue? Is there anything that you think you'd love to be different?
Exactly the same, actually. Just I mean, it doesn't happen very often anymore. But yeah, just for it not to be a statement of fact. That was the thing that used to annoy me, when it was literally someone, a stranger, or a friend of a friend would literally be like, "You're really small." Like, because there's nothing you can say to that apart from yes. It's like going up to someone and saying, "You've got blue eyes." Like, it's just such a weird opener. So I suppose, that would be my tiny little grumble. And then, in terms of, and I feel the same as Lucy, like I wouldn't change it at all for the world. I'm so glad to have had just a very slightly quirky, different filter to have that. But in terms of like what I would like to say, I guess it's just like to teenagers and kids who might feel a tiny bit different or a lot different, depending on what, for whatever reason, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. And it, as Lucy said, it really can be your superpower, the thing that makes you different, whether that's an external thing or an internal thing, can be the thing that gives you a really, really specific, different outlook on the world.
Thank you so much. I honestly, I'm thrilled. I didn't have on my list get guests on to inspire people, but I think you have done. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to, Sue, is there any, where can we find out more about you and your work?
I have a website called susanharrisoncharacters.com, and that has links to any live shows that I'm doing. Also, it has info on the writing that I do with Lucy, and also when I teach improv workshops, that information's on there as well. Or you can follow me on Twitter at SueHarrison123.
Thank you, Sue. And Lucy?
Well, you can find us both in Showstopper, at showstopperthemusical.com, and I am just at Lucy Trodd on Twitter and at LTrodd on Insta. I'm currently doing a VR project called Galaxical Implosions with Flipside VR company, co-production with Canada. But yeah, don't look at my website. It's really out of date.
We're going to put links to both these websites in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alex.
I'm Alex. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got any kind of insights or questions to ask about any of the content on these podcasts, please get in touch with us at info@the-spontaneity-shop.com, or give us a call if you're interested in our training work, which we run for businesses in person on Zoom. You could call us on 020 7788 4080. Thanks you so much once more to our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to our producer, Tom Zielinski, this week. And goodbye. You have been listening to You Can Talk to Anyone with me, Alex McLaren, and my guests, Susan Harrison and Lucy Trodd. The producer for The Spontaneity Shop was Tom Zielinski. You Can Talk to Anyone is brought to you by the House of the Guilty Feminist and is distributed exclusively by Acast.